So I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. This is John Freeman, the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, and I want to welcome everybody to the mid-year strategy event. This is a kind of a new event for this organization. We thought it made sense to have a meeting midway through the year to examine the work we've done for the first 6 months and also to examine some of the strategies we've been using and to think about changes and how we want to proceed in the next 6 months. And so that's the primary purpose of this meeting. And we're very pleased to have as our guest speaker this evening, Douglas Jester of Five Lakes Energy, somebody that I think all of us know who's been very supportive of GLREA for years. And I've had the pleasure of working with Douglas for the last several years. And he is a real asset for the movement in Michigan to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. But before we turn to Douglas, I want to do a couple of other announcements. And I first want to thank our sponsors for this evening. We have the Environmental Great Lakes and Energy, the Eagle Department of the state of Michigan. We have Michigan Saves. Patrick O'Boyle is on our board, and Michigan Saves provides low cost financing for energy efficiency as well as solar projects. I think probably all the solar contractors on this Zoom call have utilized them, and they are our green bank in Michigan, so to speak. And finally, I want to thank Harvest Energy, and Ken Zabar is not on yet. Hopefully he will join us, but Harvest Solar is a great company and they do fantastic work throughout the state of Michigan. We're going to have to make a few changes in the
John, I didn't get to you, but we'll chip in $1,000 also for you. So count us as part of it.
Well, thank you, Dave. And Dave's with Homeland Solar. Dave is critical for me getting into this industry because he hired me early on and then helped me, frankly, to get on the board. So I had the pleasure of meeting all the board members. And then, 4 years ago, I dropped off to become the executive director. So thank you very much, Dave. And I knew Dave's son, even before that, doing other political work in a different life I had. Like I was saying, our president, Kendall Kuhnman, and Diane Van Buren, two board members, are unfortunately dealing with flooding problems because of the storm. And so they're not going to be able to join us this evening. And we're frankly going to hold off then on discussion of the membership survey. We started a survey analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis of this organization. We're currently in our 30th year of existence, and the board thought it was appropriate to undergo some discussions and some internal reflection about the work we have done and what we're currently working on and our strategies and our tactics, and whether we need to make some changes based upon the input of the board, of course, based upon the needs of the industry, and finally, based upon the interests and the opinions of our membership. And Diane and Kendall were leading that effort. And so because they're unable to join us this evening as they're dealing with their flooding problems, we're going to hold off on that. But the purpose of that membership survey is to obviously inform us as we develop our long-term plans for this organization for the next several years, hopefully 30, but we'll start with a shorter number of years. So what we want to turn to at this point, before we turn to Mr. Jester, is we want to talk a little bit about the 30 years and the work we've done for GLREA. And fortunately, we've got some people on the board and probably some members who have been active for so many years that they can actually share with us some of the highlights of the history of this organization. We actually put together a document and I sent it out to all the people that RSVP'd, so you should have that with you. But I'm going to turn it over now to John Sarver to kind of talk a little bit about the history. And then we also want Dave Conkle and John Richter and Mark Clevey and everybody to chime in and give your thoughts. Wayne, everybody. So I'm going to turn it over now to John Sarver. the Secretary Treasurer of the GLREA Board.
Well, thank you, John. And, I'm going to do a brief overview and then give John and Dave a chance to share their memories. Of course, it's hard to do an overview when you're talking about 30 years, but when GLREA was founded in 1991, GLREA was the only game in town, if you think in terms of an organization just focused on renewable energy and solar energy and wind. Of course, since then, a lot of other organizations have got involved, and that's just marvelous. We have a lot of allies now. But there was a group that actually went to the Midwest Energy Fair over in Wisconsin, and they got real excited. They came back. A lot of them were in Traverse City. And so they said, boy, that was just a fantastic experience. We're going to do an energy fair here in Michigan. And so the first energy fair would have been at Northwestern Michigan College in Traverse City in 1991. And that kind of got the organization started. Now, some folks some of you may remember the Jordan Energy Institute, which had a focus on energy, solar energy and energy. And some of the recent graduates from that program got elected to the board, and they ended up moving the organization down to the Lansing area. And so we had 1995, we had an energy fair down in Lansing. A number had occurred up in Traverse City. Now, the energy fairs was really a primary focus of the organization throughout, say, about 2015. Meanwhile, though, the organization was involved in training solar installers, a lot of educational activities, policy development and lobbying. But Energy Fair was that one event that kind of brought everybody together. And the ones that a lot of people remember were the 5 years that we had the energy fairs at the Manistee County Fairgrounds in Onekama. We had very good turnout during those years. In 2009, over 4,500 people attended. We had over 140 exhibitors, and Governor Granholm was the keynote speaker. Well, education and policy, like I've mentioned, has always been a focus of the organization. And GLREA lobbied for both the Renewable Portfolio Standard and net metering in 2008. And as all of you know, that's when our first legislation was passed in the state of Michigan. I think actually the GLREA was really one of the only, certainly the strongest voice for net metering at that time. So it was kind of I don't know if it would be called a miracle, but it wasn't clear that net metering was going to be included in that 2008 legislation, but we did get it in. The initial RPS efforts led to a lot of focus on wind energy and wind farms. And so GLREA kind of jumped at the opportunity. And this is an event that I remember very well. I was in the state energy office and was one of the sponsors. So there was a big statewide wind energy conference down at Cobo Hall in 2009. And we had over 1,500 manufacturers and installers, utilities, government people, utility people. And needless to say, being a sponsor, I was very happy to see about the turnout. And it was just kind of a pivotal event because, the RPS had just been passed. There was a lot of interest on the manufacturing side and everybody else for that matter about what this is going to mean. And so having a wind energy conference at that point in time was really helpful in getting people to talk to each other and get things started. Well, as I think all of you know, we're still lobbying the legislature, and more recently too, we've been very active in intervening in the MPSC rate cases. And now I think, again, I could spend all night talking about the history because so much has happened over 30 years, but I've asked Dave and John Richter to share some of their memories. Do you want to start, John?
Sure. So I don't remember exactly how I heard about the GLREA, but I signed up back in the 1990s there, and the first newsletter I got had these huge articles opposing a large hydro project up in Canada. So I wrote them this very lengthy, detailed, and scathing letter saying, you can't say you're a renewable energy organization and you're representing me and you're opposing a hydro project. That is renewable energy, right? And much to my shock, they published it in their next newsletter and asked me to write more. And so I actually, that was sort of my starting as a contributor to the organization was, writing articles for the Energy Paths newsletter back in the 90s there. And as far as net metering, I was at the MREF, Michigan Renewable Energy Forum, right, at the MPSC, arguing for net metering back in 2002. So it took us a little while.
Dave,
Well, I got a long memory of GLREA. Wayne's holding up an Energy Fair T-shirt from way back when, 1990 something. Yeah, I gotta say that I really enjoyed going to energy fairs. I was the energy coordinator for the city of Ann Arbor. So it was just a no-brainer to go to these energy fairs and learn a lot from people in the business and meet people that I then knew I needed to know further. We decided, I don't know what it was, 5 years ago or so on the board that the energy fair was taking up all the board's time. To put on one of those energy fairs we had no staff. We were just the board, and to put it on meant we just started working on it. Basically, as soon as the last one finished, we started the next one. We dreamed of a model where we would start teaching other nonprofits how to hold energy fairs, and that's been highly successful in Traverse City with Groundworks. But I'd love to have a few more do that. I am wondering, I wanted to propose to the membership at some point, or at least in our survey process, how many would be interested in going back to the 2 to 3 day energy fair at a fairgrounds format, where I think of it like I go to a dog park with my dog, and all the people there are really interested in talking with each other and whatever, because we have the shared interest of a dog. And we also feel like anybody who has a dog's a good person. So that's 2 pluses. I think the energy fairs were the same way. Everybody was interested in solar or some form of renewable energy. And you always figured anybody at that fair was probably somebody that would be interesting to know. And so it created this social thing for 3 days. The good energy fairs in Onekama had live music. They had parties in the evening. They had people camping out for 2, 3. I mean, it was an escape. It was a wonderful social event. And I'd love to see if anybody's interested in doing that sort of thing again. And if we were, then I would just recommend to the board that we hire a professional organization to do it. Because we now know how much work it was to do all of those. The other thing I just wanted to remind people about was the fact that back just before the pandemic in 2018, we partnered with the Ecology Center in Ann Arbor and EcoWorks in Detroit and a number of other organizations with funding from the Michigan Agency for Energy and the Mott Foundation to put on something that we called the My Solar School Contest. We just created the idea. We figured out, I worked hard with a guy named Jason Bing from the Ecology Center to figure out just what it takes to do this sort of thing. What GLREA brought to the table was, knowledge about solar energy and a whole lot of installers all over the state. That the concept was that we would find student clubs and the contest would be they would need to learn about the energy use of their school and design a solar energy system that could reduce that energy and reduce their reliance on fossil fuels. They had to come up with a plan for how much solar they would build and where it would be located, either on their roof or on the ground or wherever. And they had to come up with a fundraising plan to finance it. It required a written report and a video. We had 14 entries that were submitted from around the state. The top 2 entries actually got grant funds from were granted funds from our grantees as seed money to build their solar energy systems. And to this date, a couple of years later, 9 of those 14 schools have built solar energy funded by funds that the students raised and a design that the students came up with. What GLREA did was we provided mentors to those schools from the installers in the area. If it was Traverse City or if it was Detroit or if it was wherever, we would find our installers were wonderful. And they met with these student groups and helped them design a realistic design for solar energy. What nobody knows until I tell you is that next week there's a meeting between me and GLREA, the Ecology Center and Groundworks in Traverse City to look to see if we can come up with a way to do this again next year. Because it's really a nice model, and we're working to see if we can do it again.
Good.
So, you know, GLREA, past and future, we're still doing it.
Can we encourage people to go on mute while other people are talking, please? Mark, you want to say something?
Sure. Let me just, back when both Tom Stanton and I both had hair, we worked with Janice Means to do I guess the foundation of GLREA with the Michigan Solar Energy Association that was founded in Ann Arbor with people like Ed Kelly and others. Wayne, I think, was part of that. And we also, I guess we had 3 major successes of that organization before it was basically just the energy was taken over and subsumed by GLREA. One, we did a number of conferences around at Michigan State. We brought Amory Lovins in, had a big conference at Michigan, at University of Michigan, up at Muskegon, number of Jordan College, same kinds of things. Janice also was involved. We did newsletters similar, probably not the high quality that GLREA does today, but we had a number of them. And I think Janice was one of the leaders of the group that managed to lobby the state and get them to pass the first solar tax credit. I think I have a picture someplace of Janice and several others with Governor Blanchard. We got that signed, mostly it included photovoltaics and hot water systems and air systems. Most of the systems back then were hot water systems. And then the last hurrah, we rubbed our pennies together and scraped enough money together to actually intervene in the original PURPA hearings on behalf of solar photovoltaics, and was able to get our testimony put in and establish some basis for some protocols that were finally, I guess, put in place and applied when we did a 4 kilowatt array at Oakland Community College that was interconnected with DTE. Consumers Energy, Lansing Board of Water and Light, and DTE all matched that money that we had. So that was I guess our last big hurrah. But as you can see, Janice is still here. Janice, you probably have some memories as well if you want to weigh in here. You were at the table.
Okay, I was just sending you a note or to everyone to say thank you, Mark. Am I on? Yes. Thank you, Mark. I think that you're very, very generous with giving me credit. The picture I think you're talking about was when we were getting ready to have, I think it was the 1982 conference, and I was chairing it. And the Sheet Metal Workers Solar 80 had constructed a solar oven, and we went up and presented it to the governor, and we got him to declare it's solar energy day or month, I can't remember. So I think that's what you're thinking of, Mark. Yeah, we did a lot of work. We did, but I didn't do much lobbying actually myself. It was more, I saw myself more as an educator. Thank you. I should share, this is not related directly, but I did coordinate, was it something like 9 conferences? We call them SOS for the environment, sustainability conferences, SOS for the environment at Lawrence Tech. And we still may be, unless things have changed, we may be able to get Lawrence Tech facilities at no or little cost to do future events. I'm no longer teaching there, so I don't know if I have as much pull to do that, but I'd be willing to work on it if people are interested. Thanks again.
We have a strong supporter there now, Janice, with Dan.
What was that?
Dan, we have a strong supporter there now who's a lifetime member from LTU.
Dan Farrow?
Yes, and
Yeah.
so I think, yes, we could probably, between you and him, and John Freeman, who's had a lot of interaction too, that's a good place. We need to do something on that side of the state again.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me, John. I'm done.
Any other final comments? Tom Stanton, you want to say anything? I mean, you've probably been long associated with GLREA. Okay. Well, that's great. And we're going to be celebrating the 30th anniversary this year. And I'm very honored and pleased to be a part of this organization. It's been doing such good work for so long. But like any organization, we have to be thinking about the work we're doing, how we can be the most effective in terms of developing the market for renewable energy and developing the policy framework for renewable energy. And that's where our next speaker is so important, because I think he will help us to provide perspective in terms of how far we've come and the challenges that we face in front of us. And I think it's amazing that GLREA has been doing this work for so long. It seems as though the world has come around to our position after all these years in terms of understanding the threat of climate change and the role that we have to make in order to transition to renewable energy. But to introduce Mr. Jester, I want to call upon John Richter. And John has been so valuable for me, along with another member, Rob Rafson, who they have both been a part of the effort to intervene on various cases, rate cases with the Public Service Commission. And so I think John is the perfect person to make the introduction to Douglas to help us give perspective on where we've come and where we need to go and how we can be helpful in getting there. So John.
Thanks, John. We are really honored to have Douglas here speaking to us tonight. Douglas Jester is managing partner at Five Lakes Energy, a strategy and policy consulting firm working to advance clean energy and mitigate climate change. Douglas provides policy analysis and advice to clients, testifies as an expert witness before the Michigan Public Service Commission and other public service commissions, and provides research and analysis for various clients. He's worked on integrated resource planning, energy efficiency, renewable energy planning, PURPA avoided costs, distribution system planning, cost of service analysis, and rate design. He and his wife Colleen reside in East Lansing, where he's an active member in the community and formerly served as mayor, which I didn't know till now. They are currently nearing completion of an all-electric certified passive house near Northport, Michigan that will be nearly net zero with rooftop solar. And I just want to add, it's been great working with Douglas, or really I should say watching Douglas work with the Public Service Commission. The breadth and depth of his knowledge and just the impact of his analysis and testimony, I think is probably unequaled in the cases for the Service Commission. So Douglas, great to have you here, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
It's my pleasure to be here. You're very generous. Lots of us do hard and good work at the commission, and it really is a team effort. So thanks for your part of that as well. So I am glad John asked me to do this. It was an opportunity to get out of the trench warfare that we do day in and day out and just take a quick look at where we are. I'm going to share some slides just to keep me focused and moving through this. And let me just ask, are you all seeing a slide and good visibility now?
Yes.
Okay. I know there's time for Q&A, but I also don't mind if you want to stop me along the way to ask about or converse about something that comes up. So just be comfortable with a guided conversation here. So John suggested this title, and I think it's a good one: How Far We've Come and the Challenges That Remain. I want to start with this. power generation is cleaner. On the left, we have 2020 or 2001. On the right, 2021. Top row is the United States. Bottom row is Michigan. Blue is coal. And if you look at the Michigan row there, we have really gotten rid of a lot of coal. And I'll talk a little more about where that's going. But, officially we'll be out of coal in 2040. As a practical matter, I think it's going to be a good deal earlier than that because the circumstances dictate that it will be. We have a variety of other odds and ends, but natural gas is the yellow, nuclear is the green, and then those emerging slices at the top, the brownish one is wind, and the sort of greenish slice at the top is utility scale solar. Distributed solar is too small to show up here, but it's important, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. This has helped us to achieve pretty substantial reductions in carbon emissions. We're at about 56% reduction from 2005 in Michigan this year in the power sector. And based on the consumer's announcement last week that I will talk about in a minute, economy-wide, we'll probably hit about a 30% reduction, which will beat our obligation under the Paris Agreement, which would be 28%. So we've made decent progress. All of us wish it had been faster and want it to go faster, but there's a lot of work has gone into this and a lot of accomplishment in that transition of our energy mix. Now, another part of this is that we've reduced renewable generation costs. And these graphs start in 2009 because there's a consistent source. But if you extend it back to the start of GLREA, it's the same shape, just started at a lot higher cost. That cost reduction is largely a result of learning by doing. It began with people who did solar as a hobby or as an environmental donation at considerable cost, the pioneers of GLREA amongst them. And then over time, we gained tax credits, some at state level, eventually federal, the German feed-in tariffs, and the state renewable portfolio standards that forced the market activity that created that learning by doing and let us go down this cost curve. And there are sort of formal econometric methods for forecasting these things. This cost decline is going to continue for a while, and it will really profoundly change the picture even from where we are today. So as we sit today, wind and utility scale solar costs less than new fossil generation. You can see here, utility scale solar and wind. Down here, you've got combined cycle gas, coal, nuclear, gas peaking, all significantly more expensive. So on an energy basis, solar and wind are the most cost-effective resources for new generation. And that is something that we've arrived at just in the last few years. Solar in particular reached that point about 3 years ago. So now we are seeing the results of that. I also want to make the point that wind and utility scale solar costs less than operating existing coal plants. So down here at the bottom, this little gold diamond is the national average cost of operating a coal plant. That in itself is higher than the cost of most solar and much of wind. So we're seeing that play out in things like the announcement that Consumers Energy made this past week of their new integrated resource plan. That plan will be filed next Wednesday with the commission. So we haven't seen all the details yet, but we know from the press announcement and communications from the company, the basics. So they had previously committed to retiring the Karn coal plants in 2023 and providing replacement resources with energy efficiency, demand response, and solar. They now propose to retire Karn 3 and 4, which are peaking units dual fueled with oil and gas, in 2023, and to fully retire the Campbell coal plant, their last coal plant, in 2025. In their last integrated resource plan, they'd committed to 5,000 megawatts of solar by 2030 and 6,000 megawatts of solar by 2040. Now they're proposing to go to 8,000 megawatts of solar by 2040. They haven't announced the timeline for that, but I'll note that in their modeling in support of the integrated resource plan, they assumed that they could not build more than 500 megawatts of solar. And this looks to me like they're building 500 megawatts of solar basically every year from now until 2040 in this plan. We'll
Douglas.
revisit that topic in a few minutes.
Douglas, there's a question from Dale Klein. Go ahead, Dale.
Yes, Dale, go ahead.
On your last slide, you were showing the costs for the different items. How does the cost for upgrades to the grid to support utility scale installations get included in here, or is it not? You know, like
It is included in these numbers.
it is really.
Yeah.
So rooftop and community solar, well, at least rooftop, there's no additional requirements to the grid typically, but any utility stuff is usually going to require some additions to the grid, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Douglas, there's another question from Tom Stanton.
Hey, Tom.
Tom, do you want to say it or you want me to read it? I'll read it because I think Tom may be in the basement trying to duck tornadoes too. Please help us put in perspective 8,000 megawatts of utility scale solar. How many acres per megawatt? And how can GLREA work with communities so that land use planning and agrovoltaics and photovoltaics get optimized for total community benefits? Why don't, Douglas, maybe you can just answer the first part of the question. And
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to put you off because I've got several slides a little
Okay.
further on just on that topic.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Of course. So now the hair on what they proposed is that they want to buy 4 existing gas plants, 2 peakers, 2 combined, or 1 combined cycle plant and 1 combined heat and power plant, totaling 2,100 megawatts. So why did they propose this? The obvious thing first is that coal is no longer competitive with new renewables. Second, as I mentioned, they think they can't buy or build more than 500 megawatts of solar per year, or at least they made that assumption. And that is largely related to siting challenges. And then retiring 2,500 megawatts of capacity by 2025 requires buying large existing capacity. It's just a function. It can't, that much new capacity can't be built by 2025. So buying existing capacity was necessary. And if you look around at what's available, it's gas. So that's really the motive behind what they've done. And finally, I've been picking on consumers here. They're not the only utility, but they don't know yet how to be reliable with mostly renewables. That doesn't mean that nobody knows how. It means consumers doesn't know how. So let's talk a little bit about electric reliability with high renewables. There is this whole thing that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. Fair enough. But But there are numerous reputable studies from National Renewable Energy Laboratory, from a research group at Princeton, a couple of research groups at Stanford, one at University of Delaware, all of whom are demonstrating that we can get to 95% renewables without loss of reliability and cheaper than continuing to use fossil generation. So that has to be our fundamental understanding. The tools for being reliable with the variable generation from renewables are partly that renewables are cheap enough, or will be cheap enough, that it's okay, just as we do with fossil plants, to have them sitting around not generating at times because we don't need that power. We talk about that as though it's a strange thing when we do it to renewables, but the truth is most gas plants and even some coal plants are sitting around not running a significant part of the time in order to be available to serve peak loads. So that'll be no different here. But in addition, we're going to need flexible demand, storage, and transmission. And the missing links for getting those are market structure and slow utilities. So where I spend some of my time is working on how electric vehicles will drive the development of flexible demand markets, how utility scale storage can be integrated into the wholesale power markets. And I'll characterize what I'm seeing as, in time, storage will make the market. Generation will be to storage, and then storage will really set the price based on, you know, what the state of charge of the storage is. And then finally, transmission, which helps us to deal with the possibility that the wind isn't blowing here, but it's blowing somewhere else, has been really slow to build because of routing or siting issues, essentially back to land use. And we can do a lot by integrating transmission with transportation corridors. So we've got projects going in each of these areas right now. So siting, let's turn to the land use. So for Michigan, if we go to net zero by 2050, that's the hypothesis behind these numbers, we not only have to provide renewables for the portion of current electricity use that is not renewable, but we also have to provide the electricity that's needed for transportation electrification and building electrification. And I did a little optimization model to figure out the mix of wind and solar. And we're going to come in around 35 gigawatts of solar, just to give you a scale on that. This is what we need for solar footprint, for wind project area, you know, the total area that turbines sit in, and then the footprint of the turbines and the access roads and so on in acres. And you can see that on the wind side, the acreage is not that scary, although covering 1,600 square miles of Michigan will be challenging, shall we say. But on the solar side, we're looking at, you know, 275,000 acres of solar footprint. That sounds like a big number. It's about a third of what we have in hayfields in Michigan, to give you a little bit of context. But I want to put that in a little bit of a different context. That's less than 1/10 of an acre per building in Michigan. And it's 37 acres per distribution circuit, or roughly speaking, 50 acres per substation. Those numbers, if you think about them, really aren't all that scary. If you look at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory's estimate of the potential for rooftop solar in Michigan, we can meet about 25% of our solar need with rooftop solar generation, and about 75% of it will need to be ground-based at some scale. And that ground-based can be customer-sided, but it is more likely to be utility scale or utility-sided. And as all of us know, solar can be behind the meter or front of the meter. Front of the meter is usually utility-owned or investor-owned with a utility power purchase agreement. Behind the meter is usually customer-owned, but can be leased or a PPA. So lots of business models are available here. So I want to talk a little bit about the future of behind the meter generation, given that there is that opportunity and that to do rooftop solar, and that it will help to mitigate some of the land use conflicts and challenges that we will have. So this is from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory's annual technology baseline, the 2020 edition. And these are the low cost forecasts. They have a high cost, which is essentially current cost, a median, and a low. So far, their record is that their low price forecasts have been the most accurate over the years. As an industry, we've been meeting that target. And the years go from 2021 to 2050. The blue line here is the levelized cost of energy. This is all per megawatt hour for utility scale photovoltaics. And you can see that, we're getting out here under 2 cents a kilowatt hour by, 2035. Today, energy, just the production side, runs 6.5 to 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on the utility. So production of electricity is going to get cheaper and cheaper. This sort of yellow line here is a forecast of Consumers Energy's residential delivery charges, expressed per megawatt hour, but we see it as a kilowatt hour, right? So it's today about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour to get the electricity from the power plant to your house. And then this sort of peach colored line is the levelized cost of energy for residential photovoltaics. So on a purely economic basis, if rooftop solar is going to compete with utility solar, it needs to be the sum of the cost of the utility scale solar and the cost of delivery, which I didn't put it on here, but we're almost there. We probably are there, depending on the particular opportunity. But I'm saying that by 2027, it'll be cheaper to produce electricity on your rooftop than to get it delivered to you. So there are some important policy battles now and ahead, but how can we lose with these economics? So my suggestion is stay agitated and carry on. That's my quick overview of where I think we are and what the challenges look like.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Douglas. Let's open up for questions. I know that Mark Levy, you had your hand up earlier. Mark, you have the floor. You're on mute, Mark.
Sorry, Douglas, I was wondering if that number on solar that you just gave, does that include municipal solars or just investor-owned utility?
You're talking about this utility.
Yes. So you say where rooftop solar is going to be less expensive than utility scale solar at 2027?
Yeah, that's
that
sort of about 2027.
Yeah. And does that include municipal utilities as well? Or are you only using?
No, that's consumers delivery charge, and consumers is on a bit of a tear at the moment, raising their rates. So
right.
It'll come a little later in some of the utilities that are more careful with their dollars.
So I was under the, I guess, the long-term impression with municipals that there's some parity there, but the, you know, the difference between doing rooftop solar or utility scale solar for a municipal was basically a wash. And, you know, the difference was this, if you put, you know, solar and energy efficiency on your residential housing, you increase the housing stock, you stop gentrification. Same thing if you know, use bring in like Harbor Springs or Charlevoix or Petoskey or Traverse City, start doing your own solar arrays. You can also drive the cost down. Is that accurate as far as you know?
Oh yes, yeah, I think so.
All right. So we're talking here mainly the consumers and probably DTE also on this slide.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense. You mentioned some of them
now.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the municipal utilities, and that reminds me, I wanted to mention, for those of you that are solar developers, an emerging business opportunity. Campbell plant is owned 4.8% by the Michigan Public Power Agency, which has agreements with 10 cities for that power. And if you look at their share of Campbell, it's about 35 megawatts of capacity. They'll need to have those capacity credits to meet the resource adequacy standards. And if that's built as solar, that's, you know, call it twice, 70 megawatts of solar. That'll either need to be done through joint projects or individually. And we're talking, you know, pretty much all of the smaller municipal utilities. Chelsea, for example, is one of those. Traverse City, Hart, Holland, Saginaw, Bay City, all of those small municipal utilities own shares of Campbell, and they have no control over the decisions about Campbell, so that's not a problem. But they're going to need some capacity, and I think we ought to sell them some solar.
We have some questions on the chat. Let me just go through a couple.
I got a quick question.
Go ahead,
Chairman, in the interim.
Sure.
One thing I notice with consumers is that they are building outstate utility scale. I think of our engineer that works with us locally on stuff when we have structural issues, but he's project manager with consumers, and he's doing one that's northwest of Little Rock, Arkansas, 175 megawatts. And actually First Solar, you know, out of Perrysburg supplying those panels. You may be familiar with it, but what's that distance when you're in Little Rock? How's that going to, I think it impacts square footage of land use in Michigan when you're thinking of 500 per megawatts a year, if consumers is looking at that. But what about the transmission, and how's that distribution costs likely to change in terms of geographic proximity and where land might be more expensive than what we'd have available here, or where they need it? You know, we might be better farmers than someplace in the. Can big power really move over thousands of miles?
Yeah,
for CMS and stuff.
Power doesn't move that way, and I think that, first of all, they're not counting those projects as meeting their Michigan capacity obligations. That's being done through the non-regulated part of CMS Energy, CMS Enterprises.
Okay.
And I'm sure they have a power purchase agreement with, you know, one of the utilities in Arkansas, or they wouldn't be doing it. So they're just investing in solar elsewhere.
It's MISO though, isn't it, Arkansas?
It likely is. Most of Arkansas is MISO.
Uh,
A little bit of it is Southwest Power Pool.
So you're 500 megawatts, you're talking about Michigan based, Michigan located
Yes,
additional power through 2040.
500 megawatts a year.
And everything else they might add, like the particular project I'm acquainted with, northwest of Little Rock, that's in their portfolio, but it's going to be just icing on the cake, sort of, in terms of.
Yeah, they're just doing it to make a profit somewhere else. It's not part of meeting their obligations to serve Michigan customers.
And, obligations, it's not, is it a mandate? It's not by, they're trying to just replace the coal.
Yeah.
There's no mandate that says they got to do this, is there?
No,
They
this is
could
being
stay
driven
with-
now by the economics.
Yeah, they could stay with gas if they chose.
Well, they'd have to convince the commission that
Yeah,
that's the most reasonable and prudent path. And I don't think the numbers will support it. I think the only reason they could get by with this investment in gas now is because it's existing gas and because they have to do something fast to retire Campbell fast.
But Douglas, explain one thing. They want to shut down Karn, which is also a gas plant, and replace it with another gas plant. I take it Karn is, it's a combination of gas and fuel oil, which makes it particularly uneconomic. Is that the argument?
Well, no, it's that it's ancient, decrepit, and not reliable.
Okay.
So they're sort of shutting it down before it falls apart.
I see. Janice Means asked if you'd share your slides with us.
Yeah.
Afterwards. That sounds
Of course.
great. And then John Kinch has a question about storage as an alternative to NG combined cycle, natural gas combined cycle, and where the utilities are not about that, using that option.
Mhm. So I haven't seen consumers filing yet. That'll come next Wednesday, and that'll contain their technical analysis. I do know that they included some battery storage in their modeling. I also know from technical workshops that they held and that I attended that their modeling results didn't make sense to me at a technical level. So I'm looking forward to digging into that. Consumers is, in the current rate case, proposing 3 pilot projects that involve storage, each of which has some problems in my view. But one of them would be a portable storage system that they could park next to a substation in order to relieve capacity issues in that substation. One of them is storage that would sit between 2 substations that are each periodically overloaded, but at different times, and be connected to both of them. So it would essentially transfer power between these substations. And then the third one is a behind the meter storage project for residential customers, where consumers would control the storage for their benefit, but it would be available as a backup system in the case of an outage, and they would charge customers for that privilege. So anyway, they're definitely looking at storage. I just think that they probably are getting it wrong, in my view. So, but we'll see when we get a chance to really look at their modeling.
Hey, Douglas, this is Kinch again. Thanks for your presentation. Quick question to follow up. You mentioned obliquely about the slow utilities as part of one of the issues. Can you expand on what makes them so slow? in terms of, is it really like, stranded assets? Is it just bureaucracy? Is it, why are we feeling the urgency among GLRA members and others, and the utilities are kind of plodding along?
Yeah. Well, so that's a whole bunch of things. A couple of you will know the name Ron Benz. Used to be a public service commissioner in Colorado. He chaired a panel a couple years ago that at the Brookings Institution, and he started the panel off by telling the story of 3 utility executives who were in a bar drinking, at a conference and expressing their frustration, and they decided to end it all by committing suicide and throwing themselves in front of a glacier. And the punchline is, it worked. So they're just, utilities move slowly, and there are institutional reasons for that. The regulatory system causes them to move slowly. If you think about any major investment decision, let's take the consumer's IRP. They're filing it now. The decision won't be made by the commission until a year from now. And then it'll take, a couple of years to implement those decisions. And there'll be 2 rate cases between now and then that'll determine who pays what for that. So the regulatory system is slow itself. Second thing is, they're operating at a quite enormous scale. If you think about these as companies and as the amount of infrastructure, and it is all interconnected, and so it does actually require some care. And then you were quite correct to point to the stranded costs. They are very wedded to their past investments. So the stranded costs associated with consumers' proposal here will be one of the stickier parts of the case, the financial aspects of that. And it totals about $2.25 billion. So stranded costs are a definite anchor. I don't have particular influence on the Biden administration, but know people who are, advocating there. And I've recommended that with all of the money they're planning on putting into climate change, that some of the most productive could be buying down stranded costs to get rid of the old stuff, because that's what's in the way of the new stuff.
Well, just to continue along this discussion about the utilities, what do you think are the best ways of trying to push them along, nudge them along? I mean, are they threatened? Are they threatened by the surgence of renewable energy and threatened by behind the scale solar, which is why they're reacting so forcefully in the legislative process? And what do you think, how do you think they're vulnerable? What do you think are effective tactics to get them to be more receptive to? My last comment is, I had coffee with Brandon Hoffmeister a couple of years ago. And I said, Brandon, you stand to gain a large chunk of market share by electrification of cars. And I think I used, Douglas, your statistic that if all the cars in Michigan are electrified, it represents a 25% increase in the demand for electricity. And I said to Brandon, that's huge for you. And we want to support you, Navarro's, GLREA, we want to support you. But we would like you in return to be supportive of, small scale solar. So let's make a deal. And apparently it fell on deaf ears, at least at this point. So any suggestions you have on how you view them and what we could do to be more effective?
Oh, so that's a question I think about almost every day, John, as you know. They act like This is a mortal risk for them. But there's no way, as you saw earlier, if 25% of our electricity after adding EVs and electrifying heating can be had from rooftop, that means 75% is still coming from utilities. And between heating and EVs, it's about an 85% increase in total electricity consumption. So they can grow like gangbusters from now to 2050, while still basically letting everybody do as much rooftop solar as they want. But they don't act like that. They're hanging on to their monopoly franchise, as they view it, very tightly. And I don't know that there is a way to change that in the near term. I sometimes classify states as they're the states where the state is stronger than the utilities, and then the states where the utilities are stronger than the state. And I think we're in that latter category. But we keep plugging away at it here. The economics that are showing on your screen here are, I think, what will ultimately solve the problem. If people are looking at solar and can, get this kind of cost advantage, they're going to do it. Policy will bend to that. Can't imagine that, another 5 years from now, we'll still be fighting over removing the cap on the distributed generation tariff, because the whole population will be wanting to do it. And as important and powerful as the utilities are, they don't have that many votes. So I think it's a matter of us persisting, continuing to stay in business, get better at installing, and eventually we'll just run them over. I don't have any better solution than that.
Sounds good. Other question? Go ahead,
John, can I
Mark.
make a comment on that last point Doug made?
Douglas, yes. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Douglas, I think that this issue of getting better, one of the side benefits that has occurred in the industry as communities have formally adopted net zero plans and put the power of local government behind reducing emissions, is that they've had to put programs in place to actually move the dial, help educate people on renewable energy and energy efficiency and stuff like that. So I'm part of a little project we're doing to test the idea as to whether or not those plans can be treated as justification for manufacturers' discounts. As all of the solar installers know, while the utilities can get manufacturers' discounts, somebody putting up 20 kilowatt array or a 10 kilowatt array can't. So we normally get a cost of sales discount or some discount that the local installer puts in, but we can't get manufacturers' discounts on inverters, racking, wiring, panels, etc., like the utilities can. But in those instances where we have cities making a policy to put up X number of solar within their community within a period of time, the question is whether or not that's sufficient to leverage a manufacturer's discount. And I think we'll have an answer on that test clearly by the end of the summer. But if that's the case, we should see a major reduction in the cost of solar in communities. And I just want to be very, very clear, in communities that have made and voted and passed resolutions and committed themselves by law to deal with their emissions. And they have adopted a program that they are staffing and spending money on to achieve those reductions with energy efficiency and renewable energy. And it should be an interesting thing. But if that we're able to pull this off, it's going to drop that number that you showed earlier on the slide significantly.
Sounds like a good effort.
Stay tuned.
Looking forward to hearing the results. And of course,
Got a question.
Yeah.
Does this announcement from consumers, will that help us prod DTE into closing their coal plants, in particular Monroe, sooner than 2040? And what would be the right way to sort of present that?
Yeah. So here's a circumstance for DTE that's kind of interesting. Last year, EPA adopted new rules called effluent limitation guidelines for water pollution from coal residuals. And under that rule, every coal plant has to say by this October whether they're going, which path they're going down. That one option is to invest pretty significant amounts of money to comply with the rule. The other is to commit to retiring the plant by 2028. So DTE currently has 2 units at Bell River that they had previously said they would retire in 29 and 30, and 4 units at Monroe they previously said they would retire in 2040. Now, I don't think the economics work to keep Monroe open till 2040, and I don't think climate policy lets Monroe stay open till 2040. And I think DTE knows that. So there is basically no way that the commission would let them invest in Bell River to keep it open after 2028. So I'm sure that we'll see an earlier retirement date for that. And for Monroe, if they're going to have to retire it earlier anyway, 2028 sort of becomes an attractive date. Now, I'm not telling you I think they're going to retire all 6 of those coal units by 2028, but I bet we'll see, maybe 4 of them. Just doing the math on what they can do to replace it before 2028. And we should see indications of what they're going to do in the filing they will make to Eagle in October. They, of course, have an IRP due in 2023. I actually suggested to Trevor Lauer, the president of DTE Electric, a few weeks ago, that they should, given this deadline, they should be filing their IRP early. And he didn't say no, but he didn't say yes. So we'll see.
Do you see like an immediate improvement in the air once these coal plants shut down? I mean, the answer has got to be yes, but it must be pretty extraordinary, the change in the local area.
There's a literature in the public health journals where people have looked at health effects of fossil plants by things like temporary shutdowns. There was a coal plant that was out of operation for 1.5 years in Utah. There's a long history of, sort of temporary shutdowns of other coal plants. There's one in eastern Pennsylvania where when the wind changes direction, the affected communities in New Jersey change by, a number of miles. And each of these shows quite profound health effects of whether the coal plant is operating or not, or upwind or not, that sort of thing. And it's asthma, it's heart attacks, it's in the case of the longer outages or the immediate effects of closing a plant, changes in birth defects, stillbirth, early birth, just a whole series of things where there's definitive evidence, in my view, that closing a coal plant has immediate and profound health benefits.
It's extraordinary. Just like when they shut down the incinerator in Detroit, that immediate area must have improved as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And while we're on coal closures, this is public, so it just hasn't been like publicized. I serve as an advisory commissioner for the Lansing Board of Water and Light. It's a peculiar arrangement. I live in East Lansing, so I can't vote, but East Lansing designates me as a member of the board. The budget that is near adoption closes Erickson in 2023. So that's the last coal plant for the Lansing Board of Water and Light. And that'll have health benefits in Lansing. I'm quite confident.
Great. Okay, I'm going to call upon some people that posted questions in the chat. I'm going to start with Kate Miller. Kate, you have a question for Douglas or for the rest of us?
Thank you. Yes, for everyone. How would you have a community adopt some sort of ordinance that would encourage consumers to shut down their coal plants?
There's not any way that a community has legal recourse to get coal plants closed because it's exclusively state jurisdiction. But certainly we need a way that we can do what happens in many states, which is community aggregation, so that you can voluntarily use renewables in mass in a community, thereby making the fossil plants less useful or hopefully useless. And I think that's the path we need to be working on, is to find avenues by which community can say large parts of this community are going to use renewables.
That's excellent. Yes, I know there's some communities where you try to use solar, but the community has the right to say, no, it doesn't look good. And so we need to change that. I know Colorado has a law that says if you live in an association and you want to put solar up and your association says no, you can show the Colorado law.
Right.
Yes, I can. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay.
Of course.
Dale Klein, you've got a question talking about UP utilities?
So I had the impression, I'm not sure if it's true, that maybe one of the UP utilities allowed the outflow credit to be used to, I mean, you still don't get the full retail for your outflow, but you would be able to use that credit for delivery and power supply for, electricity on the way back in. Is that true?
I don't think any of the regulated utilities are like that. I haven't recently looked at the Cloverland Cooperative, but it's possible that they have terms along those lines.
Okay. All right, thanks.
John Gorley, you've got a question?
Yeah, thanks, John. I've just been looking at this graph that's still being displayed, and the residential PV LCOE right now is about somewhere between 2 and 3 times the consumer's residential delivery charge. Why is it that many of us have convinced ourselves who installed residential solar that we're getting a good deal? What am I missing in there?
Yeah, well, this residential delivery charge is just the charge for using the wires to get the power from the power plants. So the total charge for the power, including the production, is about 18 cents a kilowatt hour. not 5 cents kilowatt hour,
Okay,
which is the delivery charge.
okay,
So that's the difference.
okay, great. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, and part of the point here is, I mean, consumers is moving not as far as they should, but heavily into utility scale solar. So if you're looking at a competition in the future between rooftop solar and what the utility is doing, you'll be competing with utility scale solar. So then that's the comparison I'm making here is, you know, whether it's cheaper to have utility scale solar and then deliver the power or just put it on the rooftop.
Okay, thanks.
Tom Stanton, I know you've been putting comments in the chat. Your comments are too long for me to frame questions. Are you able to come off of mute to ask Douglas directly?
I think I can come off mute. Did I
Okay.
come off mute?
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, all. Douglas, I always appreciate your deep study of these ideas. I don't think that I had any particular leftover question. I think much of what I've been chatting about has already been discussed. I do believe that we're in a particular time period where there's going to be a lot of opportunities because not only the state of Michigan, but so many states are now making serious climate commitments. The utilities see that happening. They know they have to change what they're doing in substantial ways. I spend all my time thinking about how we can make those things happen faster and scale faster. So I'm listening and watching with great interest in tonight's session. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Any other final questions or comments to Douglas before we wrap this portion of it up? Okay, terrific. Well, thank you very much, Douglas. You've provided a lot of very helpful information and given us inspiration and hope that we can continue this struggle. You know, I admire you so much because you consistently go after the utilities and you do it with a sense of humor, which tells me that you understand history and how things turn, and being persistent is 9/10 of the battle. And I think that's important for all of us to also understand. Do you want to say anything, just a final comment to wrap up?
Well, thank you for having me. And I do encourage you to stay agitated and carry on. We have to keep fighting these battles until we win. But I'm convinced we're on the right side of history. So
That's great. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I just want to take a couple more minutes just to talk a little bit, building off of what Douglas said, but just to talk a little bit about the future of GLREA. As I said at the beginning part of the presentation, we're doing this membership survey so we can understand better what our members are looking for in terms of what GLREA should be providing for them. Now, we have two, I don't want to say they're distinct sets of members, but we have business members like Dave Friedrichs and Rosalind Sia, who are tremendous businesses doing great work. And then we have a lot of individual members, either they own solar or wind or geothermal, or they just support the transition. And so it's really important that this organization provide value added, as Mark Clevey has said repeatedly, to both sets of these members. And I take that very seriously because we often call upon our business members for sponsorships. And I think a large part of what this organization needs to be doing is trying to develop new clients for our business members. And the great benefit of getting more clients for our business members is that as we build up the number of people that have a solar system, they then become activists that we can hopefully get involved in supporting GLREA and hopefully get involved in trying to educate legislators and get involved with, nudging the Public Service Commission to establish regulatory policies that further support the expansion of renewable energy in Michigan. So it's almost like a positive feedback cycle that we need to do. And so doing this membership survey will give us more perspective on what our members think. And I just want to kind of connect this back with what Dave Conkle said about the fact that we have moved away slightly from doing an energy fair, but we should have that discussion, because I understand the importance of these community events, statewide events, because they can help bring members together and bring the business side members together. And it also provides a communication opportunity as well. So we should talk about that. But the other part of what's also important is that this organization has been around a long time. We need to build up the membership. We need to get members to sustain their financial support for this organization. And we also need to increase the percentage of members that we can get them to volunteer. We're using this new kind of membership software, and we ask them point blank in the software, are you interested in volunteering? Because I think that's also very important, is that as a grassroots organization, if we can get a percentage of our members to be active, and we want to increase that percentage over time, then we can exert that kind of influence on the legislature and offset some of the financial contributions the utilities are consistently giving these legislators, because votes and people chiming in from their districts is what legislators listen to. And I can speak from personal experience where if I had constituents that were approaching me on a certain issue, I took it very seriously, because I knew that these people are in touch with a lot of other people within the district, and that word of mouth can have a lot of influence. Another development that we're working on that the board knows, but I've come around dramatically to how I think this model could serve this organization well, but also serve the greater good in promoting policy in the state. And that is what Katie and I are calling the solarized GLREA model. The city of Ann Arbor did Solarize Ann Arbor, where Julie Roth and Mark Clevey and a number of others have really pioneered the whole idea of holding house parties, and during the COVID crisis, doing Zoom events to bring homeowners together to learn about solar and to hear from a solar installer about what are the benefits, and how, if we can get a certain number of these interested parties to commit to buying solar, they then can get a installer discount. And this is kind of a hybrid model between the energy fair, where we have a lot of solar businesses come together, and we hope to attract a lot of people from the public to get interested in solar. Then they could go after their favorite installer that they met with at the fair. But this also involves that element of developing clients for solar installers. It also provides an element of education, but it also involves an element of getting people to join this organization and then come active and talking to their legislators. And so I think this Solarize Ann Arbor model can serve as a model for these types of localized activities, either promoted by a city or a township, or promoted by a nonprofit, or even promoted by a local activist like Dale Klein, or I think John Gorley were interested, based upon what Julie Roth presented. And so Katie McMahon, who is our intern, she and I have been working to take the model that Julie put together and kind of refining it a little bit. And Julie has given us absolute permission to do this. And so we are developing we want to develop more of a generic model that we then want to export to cities and townships and nonprofits and activists around the state. And GLREA will provide the support and work with solar developers to offer these kind of discounts. And I think Mark Cleavy's idea about whether we could also tack on a manufacturer's discount, which would be fantastic, because then you have a reduction in installation, a reduction in the cost of the panels. And then, of course, at the federal level with the 26% investment tax credit, it brings down much further the cost of installing solar, which I think makes it very attractive. And frankly, it offsets the movement from going from net metering to the distributed generation tariff, where now, of course, or people that get solar aren't able to get as much of a credit when they export stuff back to the grid. Now, we didn't talk about the decrease in batteries per se, but that's another element out there that is also rapidly changing. And a lot of our installers, Kate, you got a question or a comment? Okay, you seem, but that's cool. A lot of our installers are now offering battery storage as a way of minimizing how much electricity they export back to the grid. And so it changes slightly how you calculate your payback period, but it's part of that is to nullify, what the utilities are trying to do when they're trying to reduce the credit, which is trying to upset the economics of installing solar. One of the things that John Richter has pointed out that we have to be very careful about is efforts by the utilities to try and install a fixed fee per month for installing a solar system. DTE tried to do that when they first proposed their distributed generation tariff, and it was rejected by the Public Service Commission. But we have to acknowledge that they're going to be persistent about this. And there's even chatter about putting a residential demand charge now as well. And so there are lots of things we have to be aware of and be careful about as we move into the future. The one final thing I just want to emphasize in terms of the future of GLREA is that we haven't done a particularly good job in communications and using the press. And some of our allies have frankly been more effective at using the press as a tool and as a tactic, as a strategy to educate the public, as well as putting pressure on the utilities in terms of putting pressure on the legislators. And we're moving into that direction. And, the board has approved, spending money to engage more in communications. And we're going to be doing a lot more of that. And I think that's something that this organization needs to be doing. And I think that will only enhance our effectiveness. So these are some of the things that I view as being very important as we move into the future. But we're going to pull a lot of these various strands together the next several weeks as Diane and Kendall share with us the results from the membership survey and the SWOT analysis, and as we continue these discussions with the board. But I think this is appropriate to share with all of you, as the title of this event is a mid-year strategy event. And Douglas has laid out, how far we've come and some of the challenges in front of us, and how, as he put it, we're on the right side of history. And on more of a specific basis, we're on the right side of economics. The marketplace is working in our favor. And as I've joked with people over the last year or so, as a progressive Democrat, I don't think I've ever looked to the market as something that really enhances the enactment of progressive policies. But in this case, it's working on our behalf, and it's a welcome addition, that we can utilize to drive these policies forward. And so those are the end of my comments. And I just want to open it up to other people's thoughts as we bring this session to a close. Any thoughts that people want to share, whether you agree with me or other thoughts that you have that you wish to share? Go ahead, Janice.
I'd like to see us beyond the whole area where we're not meeting. Let me start this again. Once we start having on-site meetings, let's still have the Zoom as part of it to make it hybrid so that more people can be involved. And I think that will help, because a lot of times people can't or don't want to travel the distance to go to an on-site meeting. And also, I don't know if Mark Clevey or Father Charles saw my note or not, but I know that the Michigan Interfaith Power and Light had offered discounts on, I think, lighting, and maybe you could address that and share how the GLREA might be able to do that.
You want to go first, Mark, or?
Go ahead, let Charles go.
Well, I just one thing is when we first came into it through Mark and then Locke McCabe at the time, we had discounts at ABC Warehouse for not only houses of worship, but for all people who are part of the member congregants. Then we also worked with, later we developed a shopping cart that then went national. We leveraged, and Dave Friedrich's cousins has operated that shopping cart. So that was good. Then a third thing we did was lighting. We had someone working at that time with a TCP lighting. Chuck Wood would go to do the free lighting audits, and then they would give great discounts to houses of worship to upgrade their lighting, and especially since those types of structures have very idiosyncratic lighting. So it was providing new market for these companies, and it was also giving it was a way for us to we give some benefits to people to participate in another carrot. Anything else you want to add, Mark, to that?
No, I think it's the trick is your ability to deliver customers to somebody is the way that you leverage the discounts. So I think that GLREA has some work to do. I agree with John, and I guess I've been a strong proponent that we need to be the engine, the racing engine that delivers high quality solar leads to solar businesses that in Michigan that are our members, and we should be the primary source of that. The benefits that come from being able to do that give us a broad base of power beyond just emissions and beyond just solar. For example, the state puts more money through economic development than anything else. They give big tax breaks to businesses that come into the state, and the counties get involved in giving out money to local businesses, and there's economic development specialists within all the cities. They basically don't do anything that relates to anything we're trying to do. And the more that we can show that small businesses in our communities, solar businesses and battery businesses and et cetera, are growing, the more leverage we have to make the economic development argument on behalf of solar. And when we make that argument, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about reversing gentrification, we're talking about improving real estate values of houses. If we just took the town that John lives in, which is facing gentrification and declining value in real estate values, and put solar and energy efficiency on every one of those houses, that his community would leap to the forefront in terms of value. I think we need to really think through our value proposition broadly, and if we cannot make a case for something that the state of Michigan is putting money behind, then we need to sit down and think harder. Like Dave Friedrichs pushes us, saying we need an agricultural value proposition. I agree. There's nothing the state of Michigan or any local community does that doesn't benefit from us being more successful in pushing more solar on residential communities and growing small businesses that pay taxes, employ people, support our schools, support our safety in our community, clean air, all these things. We win on all of these things. So, help us. I guess I reach out. I strongly support John Freeman's push here. I would ask that all of you reach out and help us make this happen and push us harder, because we know what the goal is, and there's only one metric: a solar installation. And if it isn't a solar installation, then we're just talking to ourselves.
One other brief thing to add to that is that by a statewide organization such as GLREA or the Interfaith Power and Light, you can aggregate. You can also then aggregate energy savings to tell that good news story, money saved, and emissions reductions. And that's something that you can, if everybody's doing that together and sharing that information, there's a powerful leverage and good news story you can tell.
I also want to recognize the importance of energy efficiency and the work that, for instance, John Kinch is doing as well, because that's the other half of the coin, is that as we promote renewable energy, we also need to design our homes and office structures to be much more energy efficient so we can maximize, reduce the amount of energy consumption and just maximize how far the renewable energy will take us. And that's also very important. It's 7:30, 7:41. Any final comments from anybody? Okay, well, I just want, again, I want to thank our sponsors tonight, the Environmental Great Lakes and Energy Committee, State of Michigan, Michigan Saves, as well as Harvest Solar. I want to thank our sponsors, and I want to thank Douglas Jester again for joining us. I think he provided a lot of very insightful thoughts and very helpful information. And I again want to thank the board of directors of GLREA and all the members. And I'm sorry that Diane and Kendall couldn't join us, but we will reconvene and we'll be talking about the membership survey. And I can guarantee you, Janice, that even though we are going to get back to in-person meetings, we will always continue to use Zoom as a tool, because I agree with you. It is a powerful tool for reaching people, and we can save a lot of energy by not having to drive. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So have a wonderful weekend. And again, I want to thank everybody, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.